Hi everybody, welcome to part 2 of knowing which change management model should I use. So if you missed part 1 of it, check out my YouTube channel. You should be able to find the video there. It's part 1 on knowing on which change management model should I use. So in today's video, I want to talk about identifying which one should I use based on the size, the complexity, or the phase or the type of change that it is that you are managing. So I said those were some of the key characteristics that help you determine which change management model you should use based on be it size, based on it being complexity. And also familiarity plays a really big role. If you're not very familiar with a change management model, I would say tread very carefully so that you don't misuse it. So in today's video, I'm going to focus on 3 models that I have used, I'm familiar with, and I love, and I feel they're very easy to use. I'm going to talk about the Kubler-Ross change curve. I'm going to talk about the Cutter 8-step process, and I am going to talk about ProSci 3-phase steps or 3-phase approach as part of the ADKER. I'm not going to go into how to use the model. I'm just going to speak specifically to when you can use those models. So the best time to use the Kubler-Ross change curve is using it to really determine emotional response to change. When you get into a change situation and you're trying to figure out, how are people going to respond to this change, where there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of confusion, and there's perhaps some pushback and resistance to the change, then using the change curve to understand how people are feeling about the change is very useful. You have to remember that change is all about people. Yes, it may seem as if you're managing a project or it's really this change initiative that seems very abstract. You're trying to put in a new technology solution, or you're trying to restructure the organization. But guess who has to adopt the change? People. Guess who make up an organization? People. Guess who have to use the new technology? People. So people are very key. And if you're going to want to get people from A to Z, you have to figure out how best do I work with people to move them along the change curve. So looking at something like the Kubler-Ross change curve is still very relevant in terms of you understanding how people are responding to change. The Kubler-Ross change curve has its roots in loss and grief. And sometimes that's how people feel when they're going through change. The fear of loss, the fear of power, the lack of knowledge, not knowing what to do. So using a change curve such as helping you to understand the shock or the denial or the frustration or experimenting in terms of how people are feeling is very useful to understanding people's emotional response to change. And that's what something like the British transition model and the Lewin's model helps to do. So helping understand how people emotionally respond to change. So you can use that. And then the other one I wanted to talk about is the Cutter 8-step process. The Cutter 8-step process is really good for, say, project managers, or just generally looking at change and saying, how can I influence the change? How can I bring people on board with the change that I'm doing? It doesn't come with any specific deliverables, but you can actually tie some of your deliverables into the different phases. So Cutter 8-step process is good really for small to medium-sized projects. It's also very relevant if you're not a change management expert or change management specialist and you're just looking to see how you can lead and drive change. So from a change leadership perspective, change leadership being relevant to every and anybody, not just change managers, the Cutter 8-step process is really handy. And they've recently updated their 8-step process, so you need to check it out. It's the accelerated process, which works more in today's fast-paced and disruptive business environments. The third one is the ProSci model. So many people are familiar with ProSci, the ADKER and the 3-phase approach. So that's really key. The two of them work hand in hand, and I would say very useful for very complex projects. If it's a large project, it's complex, has a lot of issues and risks, and I would say this is really for change managers because it goes into a lot more detail. The ADCA is good, and in terms of showing you how people would respond to the change and how you need to work with people and their response to the change. And then you have the 3-phase approach, which shows you the different deliverables at each phase of the project or the life cycle of the change. So using those two in conjunction would be very useful. So just a recap, the Kubler-Ross change curve, very good to understand how people are responding to change in uncertainty, complexity, in an unprecedented time, even like the pandemic, to see how you as the manager or a team leader or you working with your colleagues to see how are people responding to this change and how they're going through it. So it's more focused on people. The Cutter, really good to help you give a structured process and good for anybody that wants some structure in terms of leading through a change. And then the ProSci is fantastic for change managers and change specialists in terms of a very structured approach, a very complex project, risk issues, and you want a very methodical way in terms of managing through the change. So thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, be sure to drop it in the comments box. Would love to hear from you. If you need any resources in terms of how you manage resistance to change, how you lead in today's uncertain times, or even taking some quizzes on understanding your change leadership knowledge and assessing your change leadership skills and competencies, visit my website. You have the link there. It's www.oliveblue.com/resources, and you find free resources there for you to try out. And until next time, bye.